What's up everybody? In this video we're going to be covering the book The Everything Store, which is about Amazon and Jeff Bezos. But before we get to that, I wanted to remind everybody to subscribe to this channel if they can, and to check out the description. In other ways you can support me through donating to the Buy Me a Coffee link. One coffee is equal to $1. If you could support me, that'd be helpful. But if you can't, and you want to buy this book, then you can use an Amazon affiliate link in there to buy the book, and that will help me out as well. I really wanted to review this book or read this book because it's about Jeff Bezos, who's the richest man in the world now. And, you know, I wanted to understand how he became the most successful person on the planet right now. So I wanted to read this book, and I've been wanting to read it for a while, and I got it in an audio book. That's why I don't have it to hold up in this video. And I really like this book overall. And it's written in a weird format. It jumps around on the timeline. It doesn't go in a direct timeline. It jumps around and it goes back in time when it needs to you know, to highlight parts of Jeff Bezos' personality. And another thing to remember is I'm reviewing this in 2021, and Jeff Bezos just stepped down as CEO. He's going to be a chairman now. And it's probably because he has a lot of other things he wants to pursue, like all these other mega billionaires eventually do. They eventually want to explore other things, like Bill Gates is obsessed with public health and fertility and who knows what. And Jeff Bezos does that a little bit as well, but he does it a little bit behind the scenes. And he wasn't really that way in this book. In this book, he was still the CEO, and spoiler alert, that's how this book ends. It ends with the author questioning what Jeff Bezos is going to be able to accomplish. Is he going to take over the world? Is he going to achieve the fastest shipping rates or shipping times possible? And it also ends with the question, like, is Jeff Bezos going to be successful, or is he going to push everybody out of his way, or is he going to learn to work with people? And it's really a good ending for when it was written in 2016. It seemed like Jeff Bezos was going to go on forever, and also Jeff Bezos wasn't divorced when this book was written, so that's something else to keep in mind. But it's kind of, the chapters closed on Amazon and Jeff Bezos, I think, as far as this book is concerned, because he stepped down as the CEO. So there's not really that much more that would be like, there's really not that much more that could actually be put into this book. And the Whole Foods acquisition that occurred with Amazon is not in this book either. But with that, since this is I try and do self-help on this book, on this channel, I think we could talk about the self-help stuff. And that's really what I want to learn from this book, is how to be a more successful person, like what things that Jeff Bezos did that made him successful. So I guess I could start at the beginning. The beginning of the book starts about Jeff Bezos' early career. He started at D.E. Shaw, which was a hedge fund. We've talked about D.E. Shaw in other books, The Man Who Solved the Market, which is about Wall Street and quant funds. And D.E. Shaw was a quant fund that rivaled the Renaissance Fund. So we've talked about D.E. Shaw. That's where Jeff Bezos came out of. He was involved in researching the internet when he was at D.E. Shaw. He got interested in the internet, and then that's where he came up with this concept of the Everything Store. And that's why this book is called The Everything Store. And he really pursued that. And I think that's something that can be learned from Jeff Bezos, is he was obsessed with the idea of the Everything Store. He was obsessed with the customer. The customer always came first to Jeff Bezos. And meetings, he had a seat that was left there for the customer so that they could always be considered in meetings. And that's where the book starts out. It really goes into the intricacies of how he started Amazon. He wanted to call it Abracadabra, and you know, it gets really into the details about that, the details of the early startings of Amazon. But the thing is with Jeff Bezos is he was certain that he was going to succeed, or certain in his idea, he had percentages of the likelihood that Amazon was going to succeed. And then when he went to raise money, he would tell people these percentages. Like, he was a very robotic person. That's what you get from this book, is that Jeff Bezos was a robotic person. And then he never really considered other people's emotions or feelings. And if you know anything about Amazon, you probably know that he's ruthless. Amazon's ruthless. The people have to work hours upon hours. And that's one thing that I'll say about this book all the whole way through, is that even though it seems like Jeff Bezos changed a little bit throughout the book, he really stayed true to being obsessed with growing the everything store, having the cheapest prices possible, achieving his goals. And he was obsessed with his goals and pursuing them no matter what. And that's the other thing too that I think about this book, is there's a lot of instances where Amazon could have failed, or Jeff Bezos could have failed, but he was so determined that he did not fail. And a lot of times he was subsidized by investors, because investors were there investing in Amazon no matter what. He took a lot of risks on their dollar, but most people might have succumbed to pressure from the Wall Street and the markets and early investors, but Jeff Bezos did not. He kept pursuing his passion, which was getting the cheapest prices to the customer and becoming the everything store. And I think that's something Amazon is still pursuing to this day, is becoming the everything store. It doesn't sell everything. It doesn't sell cars. It doesn't sell huge pieces of equipment, things like that. It does sell web services, and it talks about that in this book. It sells shoes, which they talk about Zappos and the acquisition in here. Diapers, which talks about the acquisition of diapers.com. And that's another area of this book that shows Jeff Bezos's passion, is the acquisitions. He was ruthless in acquisitions and pursuing companies. Now, the beginning acquisitions that Amazon made were not very successful. He went on this startup acquisition spree, and a lot of those failed. But he was an early investor in Google too, which was not a failure. So early on, his investing wasn't so good, but later on, he became really good with his acquisitions. And he ended up cornering a lot of companies into having no choice, because he could undercut the price. And that's another area where it shows how ruthless he was. If he wanted to acquire somebody and they didn't want to be acquired, he would just undercut the price. But you can't do that. You can't undercut a company like that unless you have capital. And he had plenty of capital from the capital markets. So I think that's another area where Jeff Bezos was lucky. I mean, that's part of being successful, right, is luck. But it's also another part of being successful is believing in yourself. And I think that was one thing that Jeff Bezos did a really good thing of in this book, is he kept on believing in himself. And I think that's where most people are going to fail when they're pursuing their ideas or businesses, is they're not going to be relentless and ruthless. And I think in some respects lacking emotion. And I think that shows throughout this book, the way that Jeff Bezos approached employees. It's brought up in this book frequently by the author that he would just yell at employees, and he didn't necessarily believe in work-life balance. All the things that people take for granted today, Jeff Bezos never believed in any of that. It was just him growing the company and him making the customer feel better or more comfortable shopping on Amazon. I mean, there's a lot of parts of Amazon that are discussed in this book, like Prime, one-click shopping, Amazon Web Services, Prime Video, Kindle. I mean, some of these things are just, you take for granted with Amazon, but like there's a huge part about Kindle, which I feel is somewhat irrelevant now, because I don't know too many people that own a Kindle or talk about how much they love their Kindle. And this book tries to present the Kindle as if it's going to become the iPad, but I don't think the Kindle is as big as its author makes it. It talks a lot about the sales tax battles, because if you remember about Amazon, they used to be big on not paying sales tax, but ultimately they gave in. And there's a lot of these battles that Amazon had to fight through: sales tax, facing antitrust litigation with regards to the way that they manipulated book pricing and pressured publishers. There's all these things that you're going to face if you're an entrepreneur, and Amazon faced them all. Jeff Bezos faced them all to become one of the largest companies in the world, and him the richest man in the world. And I think his approach to life, which I would call ruthless, is pretty good. But I think another thing too to consider about Jeff Bezos is that is he's more of a behind the scenes guy. A lot of these billionaires like Elon Musk and Bill Gates are out in front of the media and trying to get attention, whether they seem like it or not. And Jeff Bezos did acquire the Washington Post, but he's not out there trying to get in front of the media. He's not trying to manipulate the media. He's not getting involved in politics directly. He's more behind the scenes. So I think that's something else to be considered too. But with Amazon's story, you have to think of all the challenges they faced. The sales tax issue. They avoided sales tax for a long time, which allowed them to be successful. And they thought that that was central to their company. But once they had to give in on the sales tax, they were still successful. So I think it's just being relentless. And you're going to face a ton of issues if you're starting a company. And that's just something to be considered, especially if you're going to be a large company and you're just going to have to overcome them. And Amazon had tons of battles, which are spoken about in this book with Kindle, with all these projects that they're developing. And then at Jeff Bezos, it speaks a little bit about his Blue Origins company, which is a space rocket company. And him, Elon Musk, and the Virgin Galactic guy are all interested in this stuff. I think it's just something when you become a mega billionaire that you want to go into outer space. So that's just something else. I think what the outer space stuff shows is that these people have extremely big imaginations, bigger imaginations than most of us. And that's probably what allows them to be successful, is that their visions are so big. And they end up accomplishing it because their visions are so big that even when they don't accomplish them, whatever their second biggest vision is, it ends up being way bigger than anybody could ever think of. So I think that's something else too, is like all these guys think about bigger the picture than most of us. They think about outer space. They think about rockets. They don't think about just making enough to get by. And then I think one of the last things I wanted to talk about was when you read about entrepreneurs and you read about startups, there's always these lists of things you have to do, or ways you have to play the game. You have to be a nice guy. You have to do it this way. You have to follow the rules. But I think what this book shows is that I think people become successful in different ways. And Jeff Bezos was ruthless the whole way through. As Amazon grew, he even wrote this creepy letter of what he wanted Amazon to become, because Amazon was being viewed as evil by their employees, by regulators. And he's like, how do we become less evil? And he started comparing like Disney to Exxon, and it was just very rigid and robotic. And I think what I take away from this book and Jeff Bezos is that you don't have to follow the rules. You don't have to listen to these venture capitalists. You don't have to listen to all these people that say you have to do a certain thing to be successful. I think if you're passionate enough and you have a customer base and the customers that demand your product, I think you can have whatever approach, as long as it's not extremely destructive to you or other people, and you can be successful. You don't have to be the nicest person. You don't have to be politically correct. You don't have to be out in front of the press every day. There's different ways to accomplish things, and I think that's something that Jeff Bezos shows in this book, is that there's different ways to approach things. You don't necessarily have to change who you are either. I don't think Jeff Bezos changed who he was from the beginning of starting Amazon to the end. I think he was the same person. And I think that's another thing too. When you're starting a business, you can't lose yourself. You have to stay connected to yourself and your purpose and your vision, and bringing value to the customer. And there's a lot of other information here too, if you're just interested in business in general. Ways to approach startups, acquisitions, how Jeff Bezos came up with ideas and the teams he used. And he built a lot of teams from Walmart, Costco. He talked to people from Costco. He just pulled a lot of information from different places. There's a lot of information to be learned about startups in this book. But those are the things that stood out to me. And I recommend this book. It's really good. It's kind of monotonous and boring, but it's a lot of good information in there. So it's just kind of technical and boring. And another thing is the author gets obsessed with Jeff Bezos' family life, like his father. But I think the author was digging for something there about Jeff Bezos and his father, because his biological father wasn't involved in his life because he had him when he was a teenager, but that part just doesn't stand out to me. There's nothing to be learned from that. But overall, this book has a lot of really good information, especially if you want to learn about Jeff Bezos and Amazon and how it began. I would recommend this book. So that's my book review for The Everything Store. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video. Thanks for watching.